Today's talk really is, and sorry I have a teacher voice, so I might walk in and out of the mic. So today's talk really focuses on two things. One, if you have been out of the education industry for a while, and by a while you mean like 5 or 10 years, or you never touched cyber education, it's really good for you to know as veteran security professionals to know how are future educators actually getting educated, what are the kinds of skills that they're actually learning from, and more importantly, I'm going to be a little critical of the security education industry. So I want to start first of all by saying all my thoughts are my own and not Mount Hood's, even though that the giant logo is right there, because I am going to be critical of some of the ways that I think that cyber education is failing not just our students but also the industry as well. But I'm also really excited to honor and be really pumped about what we're doing well. And I think that that's one of the really great things about this B track is that it is really focusing on how do we encourage the professionals within our industry to skill up, and how do we bring people into this industry so that not only that they're qualified, but that they're not misqualified, right? So that we're not teaching to old technology or that we're teaching the right technology for our given community. So the obligatory who am I? By the way, this is my favorite cybersecurity joke ever of all time. So I am a cybersecurity and information security instructor at Mount Hood Community College. My degree in nonsense, I have a master's in cybersecurity, which is a pretty new thing, by the way, so you have to get it online. There's not a ton. I think OSU, and does PSU offer an MS in cybersecurity, do you know? So it tends to be overwhelmingly a computer science track, right? Which for many of you know, if you are really into development in computer science, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going really heavy into IT and cyber, right? So it's kind of cool, kind of a new thing. But I actually came originally, I was a K-12 educator, so I also have a master's degree in education, and weirdly enough, I have a bachelor's in English. So talking a lot about the humanities, the crossing of technology, it's really, I feel like that does aid me personally, but again, weird track on getting where we are today. And for those of you who care about certifications, I am a CEH. I really didn't want this one. This was part of my master's program. I'm not really big into forensics, but I have it. And I am CompTIA Security Plus. So I want to talk first of all about the talent gap. How many of you have heard a headline or know about the cybersecurity talent gap that exists? Okay. So I literally typed into Google like last night, talent gap, and I was able to grab these headlines all published in 2018. Now, I will say, I think there's a lot of fear-mongering. I think that there's a lot of vendors trying to sell certifications, right? So you're trying to get as many people into the workforce as possible. But there is a consensus that there is a skill gap that exists within cybersecurity. And has anyone ever tried to hire someone in cyber, like maybe like, or let me rephrase that. How many of you would say that generally it's either neutral or hard to find a good cyber person when you're recruiting? Okay, that's true, right? Neutral to hard. Whereas like when I went to apply as an English teacher, high school English teacher, there were 300 other applicants that were more qualified than me, right? So definitely it's not an industry where we have a glutton of talent. Does anyone know cyberseek.org? So this is we'll call it a research project published by Burning Glass, Bureau of Labor Statistics, and certification providers, so CompTIA, ECH, things like that. And what they decided to do is pull a ton of open source data, places like Burning Glass, Indeed.com, Monster, to basically say how many open jobs are there in cybersecurity. Now we're looking at this at the nation level, and what we're seeing is that there are 768,000 or so currently employed in cybersecurity, and that there are over 300,000 open positions in cybersecurity. That's a lot, right? Especially at a national level. But what's cool about this map is that you can also break it down not just by state, but also even large metro areas where a lot of this information comes from. And according to cyberseek.org, so you always take all this stuff with a grain of salt, there are supposedly 2,400 open cybersecurity positions in the Portland metro area. And I always say Portland metro, we're not just talking downtown, but also the city of Gresham that needs an IT person. Mount Hood Community College literally just hired their very first security analyst in their own IT department. So we're not talking about the big players, but also just your general IT staff and general IT departments that's realizing they need a security professional for the first time. So as an educator, my job always is to try and train my students for high wage, high need jobs, right? Because And again, I came from a liberal arts background. When I got a bachelor's in English, I knew that the job market for the English major is limited, to say the least. Now, there's journalists and there's writing, and I don't bash my experience. It was such a rewarding experience to engage in the humanities like that. But when we're talking about a career pipeline, it's kind of a scary thing to train someone up in, right? So for me, as an educator, one of my personal passions is to make sure that I'm doubling down on skills that not only are useful and needed in the industry, but will give my students livable and even high-wage jobs. That's my personal commitment. And in the community that I serve, which is Gresham, which is, a suburb of Portland, but Gresham nonetheless, we have a lot of people who really need that opportunity, who need to be able to bring themselves out of a situation. And cybersecurity right now is one of the, I think, easiest and most important ways to fill that. So we see this giant skills gap that exists, and so educational institutions are trying really hard to jump on this and fulfill this need. Again, the obligatory, so again, this is the fear-mongering, right? Supposedly Symantec published in 2015 that there will be 6 million jobs in cybersecurity globally with a shortfall of 1.5 million. Another study shows it as 2 million shortfall, right? So we're rising in how many people we're gonna be missing. This is probably the most insane number, but 3.5 million cybersecurity openings by 2021. Okay, let's just say, for instance, it's even a fraction of that number. That is still an amazing opportunity. We're talking about 0% unemployment in an industry where you have, like my dad, who worked for Hollywood Video, God rest the soul of Blockbuster and Hollywood Video, right? Right, you have industries fading, right? Millennials not buying this or that, killing industries, and yet you have a 0% unemployment rate that's only going up right now. So again, I don't buy into this, but at the same time, as an educator, I try and look at generally what's being said, and I try and build programs that can honor and, like I said, push students into filling these jobs. And kind of an interesting snapshot. We graduate, so we have about 60 to 80 students in our program at any given time, which means that we graduate, 30 or 40 students a year in our program, which is pretty good for a small program. So even if there truly are 2,400 open jobs in the area, we're hitting a small dent, right? And let's just say all of the Portland metro area graduated 300 cyber-focused, right? And we're not just talking about developers, right? Because students who have bachelor's degrees of computer science, they're filling all the programming jobs, all the dev jobs, right? So even if we optimistically say we're graduating 300 students a year, right, do math, right, 3, 6, 9, 12, it's like 5, 6, 7 years before we can even fill the open jobs that exist, right? Now, there are plenty of other tracks not through education to get into InfoSec. How many of you don't have a formal education in InfoSec? Right, so that's the reason. It's because we're reaching out to non-traditional ways to fill these roles because education isn't filling it fast enough. So if you were to walk away from anything in this whole talk, this is the core thing. If educators are not staying current, teaching the right skills, and setting the right standards, then you are stuck with terrible coworkers, and everyone just has a bad time, all right? So I need, and when I say I'm representing the education community, but I'm not actually putting words in anyone else's mouth. We need your help. As an educational institution, we need to lean on industry partners for a lot of different reasons to ensure that you have awesome and high talent peers to be filling those critical positions within your organization. So who's actually teaching information security? This is a brand new field when it comes to education. Now, I have worked in the public sector long enough to know how slow and sluggish government is. And as Justin talked in his earlier talk, he was, I projected a date for getting some interns into Cylance like in a year from now, right? Because that's how slow government works. And he's like, no, let's do it this summer. And that was like mind-blowing to me, right? And so the fact that a lot of four-year institutions are adopting cybersecurity is actually really impressive, especially at the rate that they're doing it. So I'm sure I'm missing things here. However, the way that I split them up, and this might be an inappropriate split, I'm sure that people, the CS focus degrees will get mad at me, but generally speaking, there are two major tracks that schools would train cybersecurity. One I call IT focus, which tends to live in their business IT colleges, really focuses on networking, hardware, infrastructure, versus you take someone who has a computer science degree, which is typically development, programming, data science, that then they layer something on top of it. So they'll maybe say, okay, you've taken your core fundamental development courses, and now you can either get a minor or a focus area in a given particular field of cyber. And that tends to be things like AI, deep learning, cryptography, things that really lean on that development background, right? But more often than not, you don't have the CS focus degree saying, all right, here's how you plug in a Cisco router and here's how your network interface card works, right? And that's because they're just two different beasts, right? Like I have no business teaching data structures. I have zero concept of what that even means, right? But I have business talking about networks and network interface cards, right? So again, these are the two. Cal, as was mentioned earlier, is actually a vocational tech high school that has been teaching cybersecurity, a 2-year focused program for almost 5 years now, which is really cool. Mount Hood Community College was the first community college in the state of Oregon to be offering cyber education. And as of very recently, Chemeketa Community College is now pioneering a cybersecurity program as well. PCC offers, I think they call it a certificate. It's like 3 classes you can take. So there's definitely a lot of push right now in trying to get cyber education in traditional colleges. PSU, I know, offers a 4-year degree, of course, in computer science, but I think, is it a minor in cybersecurity, or what exactly is it? Certificate. Okay, so definitely, students who are going through that BS program have a great option to go through and sort of get exposed to a lot of really cool facets of cyber. George Fox actually did just release a focus area as well, but again, it's computer science focused. U of O is a 4-year institution. They do have a master's degree in computer science and information assurance, and same with OSU. But one of the things that, and this is where I'm going to talk initially about the things that we do well and the things that we don't do well. If I want to look at a student right now and I want to tell them, okay, they want a degree in cyber, right? Like I'm looking at a 16-year-old when I was teaching in K-12. Well, I'll tell them, okay, well, if you want a degree in cyber, that's not a 2-year, because some people just don't like the 2 years, then they have to go through a full 4 years, maybe at PSU where they're able to get a really great certificate, and then they have to go to a master's degree where they're primarily focusing on threat research, malware, right? The stuff that requires just ultra in-depth knowledge of cybersecurity and systems. But if they're like, I'm just really pumped about defending a network, well, you don't need a master's for that, right? In fact, it's and I love that term, it's more like the blue-collar work of cybersecurity, which is, to be honest, where a lot of those open jobs are. Of course, there's plenty of open jobs for those master's degrees, right? And plenty of open jobs for even those bachelor's degrees. But we need to be filling all ranges of the industry. And we need to have our educational institutions successfully doing that. And again, so that's that information technology. And there's not any one or right answer. We have jobs, of course, in both IT and in computer science or data learning. I am of the camp of information technology. That's where my program primarily lives. But I still encourage students to go into computer science if they're really pumped about development and programming and secure coding. So like I said, Cal is in Gresham. I won't spend too much on that. They do a lot of great CIS courses, so Cal's a really great school, and of course Mount Hood. We are incredibly certification focused. Now some of you are like, oh cool, I have some of those, and some of you are like, oh god, I could hate certifications, right? I put this here not because we're slave to certifications so much as I like to let you guys know that our students go through the equivalent of, like, how many of you have a CCNA, or at least know what that training is like? If you are CCNA, even if you don't value the cert, at least value the rigor it takes and the knowledge that the students at least have as a result of those certifications. So students who have no knowledge of networking go through our curriculum, sure they might get the certification or not, but at least they know what a network card is and they know how to configure those networks. So they go through the Cisco series. A+ is sort of our primer. If you guys are familiar with the A+, it's like help desk, right? Help desk stuff, how to build a computer, basics of networking. But again, we have so many students who are like, I have no idea what a computer is, right? So it's a really important primer. We do Linux+, again, more for Linux foundations, Security+ for security overview, and I'm fighting really hard to get CEH, again, not because I value that cert as it is, I think that they need to have some offensive security as well. We also do Python programming, disaster recovery, business continuity, SQLs, forensics, blah, blah, blah. This isn't a pitch for my program. What I want to talk about, though, is I get so many people, especially when I'm talking to CISOs or HR people, and I can read between the lines, community college, right? I will say, and again, this is where I do not want to down any of the 4-year institutions, but I have I know the process it takes to build a new class. I know the process it takes to build a whole new degree program. And it is horrifying. Like, it takes years for me sometimes to be able to suggest a class to offer it. So let's say, for instance, at the awesome internship, and I'll talk about this in just a moment, experience, I learned about PowerShell Empire, right? Which is like, oh, dude, that's old news for many of you, right? But I just learned about it. It's really cool. And so if I wanted to be able to say, okay, based on my understanding, there's so much of living off the land, PowerShell Empire is so powerful, well, we need to offer a class that really focuses on how to use PowerShell for automated tasks and how to defend against it. Like, that's something I felt like was really important. A community college is much more flexible than a four-year university, so I was able to approach my dean and I was able to offer it this year. So that's one of the things about community colleges, especially when you're teaching technology courses, not just big abstract concepts, but like the nitty-gritties of what buttons to flip. Community colleges are a little better suited for that. So I build my program much more as a vo-tech program, where the students maybe aren't going to be CISOs. That's fine. They're not going to be the admins. They're not even going to be the threat researchers. But these are the guys who are going to be sitting in that SOC. These are the people who are going to be sitting in these actual rooms defending your networks. And hopefully they skill up as they move on, right? So they're not just stuck in whatever tech they learned in my program. Okay, so one of the things too is I learned very quickly that cybersecurity is kind of a laughable term in the industry, whereas we much prefer information security, infosec. Unfortunately, the public just digs up cybersecurity, so I have to code switch all the time between when I'm talking to students and when I'm talking to, even like, sometimes we'll have like our state reps come in, I'm like, all about cyber, but then I feel like you guys laugh at me when I call it cyber, so I'm gonna try and call it infosec from now on. Okay, and one of the things too about, it's important for you to know that I have a hard time doubling down on any particular set of technology. Like, yeah, we do Cisco, but networking, right, that's pretty general. So we train our students an inch deep and a mile wide. And this is the approach of a lot of cyber education, where you take a survey class, you take a survey of web application pen testing, you take a survey of cryptography, you take a survey of X, Y, and Z, which means that your students or new emerging people coming out of these colleges are gonna have an approximate knowledge of many things, right? But when they enroll into your actual organization, when you hire them, you might need to do a little bit of that extra work to then train them and say, okay, yeah, you know what DNS queries are, or you know what the generals of pen testing are, but now you're gonna be a dedicated red teamer, right? And we're really gonna talk to you about what that means. Because as a result, I can't double down for the sake of my students on any one particular piece of technology, because then I'm not exposing them to the range of the industry, right? So my job, remember, always is to serve my students and to make sure they have the greatest opportunities as possible. So as an industry, that's one thing you need to be keeping in mind, that we are training generalists more often than not than we are ultra-specific compliance managers. So why should you care about cyber education? Well, first of all, this is where really I have a lot of opinions about this. Certification bodies like CompTIA, EC Council, and Cisco, they dominate the IT and InfoSec curriculum. 100%. So when I basically put that I was teaching to A+, I take all of the exam objectives and I build lectures around hitting every single one of those exam objectives. So if you don't agree, like let's say you're like, wow, half of this isn't really relevant, then we need to know that, right? Because we're getting sold, we're getting pitched, we're getting lobbied, we get free curriculum, fully built lessons. So as an instructor, it's really hard for me to say, wow, I'm not gonna accept this resource, right? Especially because I do see a lot of these certifications on job descriptions, right? They do appear. But one of the things you have to know is that this almost exclusively dominates the IT sector. Not so much the computer science, right? What's going on in like the development shops, but specifically the IT-focused schools, we want to just slam as many of these certs on as possible. So one of the things that I need to be able to reach out to industry is I need to say, okay, does nobody actually value Security Plus? Like, is that something that like is laughable at most people? And if that's the case, we need to stop teaching that. But until we reach out to industry, before we hear the laughs on our face, we continue to teach it because that's the direction that we're getting pushed. And I'm not saying, when I say we, I'm literally saying at a national level, that's who's going to these teacher conferences, that's who's sponsoring them, and that's where the majority of educators are turning. So as an industry, you need to be aware of that. Whether or not you agree with it, that's the state of education right now. The other thing too is you do need good people, right? You really need high quality, you really need high quality talent. So if education institutions are not teaching the right skills, or if they're not prepping students for the realities of the field, then you end up with underqualified, and I use that term misqualified. It's funny because PowerPoint yells at me and says that's a misspelled word, but I like that word. The reason why I say misqualified is because let's say that we double down on the Cisco certification, and you're like, okay, wow, all of Portland doesn't use Cisco technology, which I don't think is true. I think most people do. But let's just say that was the case, right? We have miscertified them. We have misqualified them. So I want to be able to look out not only to the Portland metro area, but even at a national level and really see what skills do we need to be teaching. Because let's be real, you guys, most cybersecurity instructors at a four-year university, they either came from the science, the math, or the computer science background and trained themselves up in cyber, right? That's the evolution that's occurring. So most of the people who are teaching cybersecurity are either approaching it from an academic standpoint, or like in my case, I just got the master's degree and started teaching. Like I have zero professional experience, and supposedly I'm training other professionals, right? Like that's kind of messed up a little bit, especially in an IT level. Now, I'm not gonna discredit myself. I think I'm a pretty good teacher, but my point being is that I need to supplement my understanding. I absolutely need to. And when I look at the majority of my peers, they're all in the same boat as me, at least again at the IT technical level. So you need high quality talent, so we need to reach out to industry to help guide us what we need to teach. And then lastly, one of the things as well is that we saw that giant skills gap. We can't close the skills gap by just hiring the right people. Microsoft released a study about a year and a half ago that most girls become interested in STEM at the age of 11 and a half, but they start to lose interest at 15. 15 is when you can pinpoint and say, wow, I don't see myself in STEM anymore, right? So if you're trying to fix the problem with a new workforce with people just graduating college, you're missing where we need to be focusing and doubling down our efforts in cybersecurity education. Yes? Right. I mean, I can tell you, when I was teaching at Cal, I was working at juniors and seniors, and I saw all the same stereotypes existed, and I tried really hard to recruit, but I mean, there's only so much you can do at the end of the road, right? Like, you have to be touching more and more of those middle spots. Okay, so, again, state of cyber education, pivot. So there's a bunch of national and state cyber education pushes that are really influencing us. One is NIST, which is God, I hate the acronyms. NIST, we all know NIST, right? National Institute of Standards and Technology. They created NICE, they really like their acronyms, which is the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education. They offered tons of frameworks, and they are the big push on grants that are available to us right now. They dominated, they broke down all cyber jobs into these core, what do they call them, like domains. And then we get money as schools if we teach to those domains. So again, we're letting government dictate what we should be taught, right? It's not coming from industry, but I do know that many of the people who sit on the NICE board are hopefully from industry. The NSA, they will certify schools as centers for academic excellence, which is actually pretty cool for us because it qualifies us for grants, but we have to do a pretty rigorous review of our curriculum. So that's cool. And if you don't know about Cyber Oregon, it was an awesome initiative. Kate Brown signed Senate Bill 90 into law, which basically restructured cybersecurity at the state level. But one of the big things it did is it opened up money for workforce development. So schools are trying to pull from state funding to be able to successfully do more cyber initiatives. Now, this is where, and with respect to my time, this is the thing that based on our keynote, how many of you were kind of pumped after today's keynote? I know I was, right? And you're probably wondering like, well, okay, what does that mean? How do I even find someone to mentor? Like, what do I even do? What are my next actionable steps as a result of this? I'm literally going to give you a checklist of things you can do. Right? Like literally there's a paper I'm gonna give you that you can pick from any of these 10 things and you will make measurable, actionable differences in your community. The first are internships. Now, we've heard a lot about what internships mean, but I cannot tell you the amazing benefit that internships have on budding security professionals. Because not only do they see what an actual development shop looks like, but they also know, like, do I really need to wear a tie to work? What does it mean to interact with a boss? How do I write this report? Like, those are things that even returning adults don't know how to do if they're shifting from one industry to another, right? So internships are incredibly important. As was discussed earlier, I had the amazing opportunity to send 2 of my students, along with myself and a colleague, to Cylance to go through a full 5-week internship experience where we did controls testing. And as an educator, I learned an immense amount from this intensive experience with an actual enterprise level company. So not only can you offer internship experiences within your organizations, but you can even invite other instructors to come in and learn. Especially during the summer, I will spend portions of my summer hanging out and learning cyber with you and helping you do your job instantaneously. Again, like I said, we did that. I just want to be really respectful. So let students surprise you. A lot of them are actually really good, and they pick up skills really quick. I'm going to pick on Justin for just a moment. One of the things that I think, really, I was so glad to hear was he basically just said, hey, go learn PowerShell Empire. And 3 hours later, my students knew PowerShell Empire, right? So even though they didn't know it, they were able to follow guides, go to tutorials, and they were able to pick it up and immediately start working it within our environment. So let our students surprise you. Even young people who are really pumped about cyber, they will do good work within your organization. And believe me, I will not recommend my terrible students to you. Just know that. There are some students who I would not, in like a batch chance in hell, send your way. I will only send you the students who I think are ready for it, have the skill set for it, and who I think would be really successful. Be guest speakers, seriously, like a good example. I'm teaching a unit on forensics, and even though I have that damn cert, I still don't know what forensics means, right? So one of the things that I want to be able to do is pull up a hex editor and dig into some stenography, right? So I can follow these old tutorials, or I could literally say, hey, do you want to swing by the Mount Hood campus for an hour or two and show my students how a hex editor works? Sweet, dude, I'll buy you lunch. Right? Seriously, that's the kind of thing where when we say guest speaker, we don't need a formalized talk. You can literally just come in and sub me out for a topic I don't know super well, because my day is access databasing, cyber fundamentals, A+, and then I'm teaching an ethical hacking class. Like, my day is so fragmented in the skills I need to know that I sometimes just need a pro to come in and help me out. We have just as well Gen Cyber. There's an amazing opportunity for serving our K-12 students. The Northwest Cyber Camp is an awesome camp that is also run during the summer. It features Cyber Patriot curriculum, but it also has guest speakers every day, so you can come in and give like an hour talk. Like I said, I make guesses about what should be taught. Like, I'm a pro at pen testing. Okay, cool. I have a web development background, but I have no idea what should be taught when it comes to databasing. Like, should I still be teaching SQL? Should I be doing a survey of no SQL? Things like that. So sometimes I just want to pick your brain, and if, let's say, you're in database security, it's really helpful for me to say, hey, what are you working with? So what are the things that you're seeing in an industry trend? And even that informal conversation can really dramatically help shape my curriculum, and then, as a result, positively impact my students. And again, another opportunity, let's say that I'm teaching forensics and you have a really great, I don't know, and again, it's of course depending on NDAs and everything, let's say you have a really great snippet of network traffic that is totally fine, there's no sensitive data in it, that you think would be really interesting for me to show my students. I'll take that PCAP, load it in Wireshark, and show off this really cool anomaly that shows up. That's the kind of thing that might take me literally hours to build that lab. That's something that you spun up in like 2 seconds, right? So if you think about something really cool that's going on, something that is really exciting, some new idea, some problem that you just solved, share that with local InfoSec teachers, and that can get turned into an entire lesson that would be really beneficial. And again, it's something that would save me hours of time for a really positive and meaningful impact for our students. In addition, one of the things that in order for me to get funding from the state, I have to have something called an advisory committee, where I have a group of people who are supposedly industry experts who help guide our program. A lot of these people, again, they're programming folks. They're not actually cyber folks. So if you want to actually help come in and help serve one of your local community colleges or help serve one of your local universities, a lot of them all need an advisory council. And let's say I have 10, maybe 5 actually show up to the meetings, right? Because of scheduling conflicts. So we like big rosters of advisory committees so that when we actually have a meeting of 10 or 15 people show up, we have really great conversations about what we should be teaching from a multidisciplinary field. And right now, my advisory committee is all CISOs too, the security folks we have, which isn't bad, but when I'm saying, hey, should we learn PowerShell? They're like, well, let's talk about the soft skills. I'm like, okay, but do they actually need to know PowerShell? Because they don't know the answer to that. Another thing too, there's tons of awesome cyber competitions that we would love to have you come in and coach some of our students. We can help spin up a club. We have like ASB money for that. So if you want to come in and help really dig into blue teaming or red teaming, you can help coach a team. And again, just share stuff that's really cool. And seriously, this isn't a plug, but I know that there's adjunct faculty positions open right now at PSU. I'm serious, you guys, teach a class. It's great side money, and most of the time, you can just focus on an area that you need. Like Mount Hood, for instance, we're offering 2 database classes, like advanced database courses. None of us know anything about databases. So we're looking for adjunct faculty who are just really pros at databasing, right? You could probably make about $1,500 at Mount Hood per month just by doing adjuncting 1 or 2 classes. So if you are maybe a contractor or you're looking to have a more flexible kind of schedule, this is a really amazing opportunity for you. Many of the students, and this is, I'm going to wrap up my speak because I know I'm running out of time. Many of my students walk into a degree program to skill up and build a better future for themselves. We need your help to fulfill that promise. You personally can enrich the lives of others with your professional experience and support. You can make a positive change and investment into your professional community. And that's our call on to you. Believe me, I got it. If you never talk to me ever again, I'm sure I'd be fine. But I know that my experience and my students' experiences and all the students in our local community could be so enriched by positively partnering. It's every time I've worked with industry, it has been an amazing, amazing experience. Okay, last thing, if you guys want a summary of what I just talked about, I made a bunch of handouts. It's the checklist I promised you, so please come and grab it. And again, this link is on the back. This is a good example. We're rebuilding our cyber program right now, and I just need a bunch of insight around specifics, like should I use Splunk or the Elk stack? I have no idea, right? But my point, right, is that's what this is asking. This is asking really specific questions that I just need industry pros around. So if you have an opportunity, it takes maybe 15 minutes, go ahead and please take this survey and you can make a meaningful change right now for our program at Mount Hood Community College. That being said, guys, thank you so much.